afternoon. I'm not really sure you had a choice, but thank you anyway. My name is Catherine Guillot, Catherine Nicholas Guillot. The Catherine Nicholas part is born and raised in the United States, in Philadelphia. Has anybody ever been to Philadelphia? No. Okay. Has anyone ever been to the United States? Oh, good. Oh, you've been to Philly? Oh, great, great. All right, so this afternoon we are going to be talking about a subject that may interest you, but even if it doesn't, it's a subject you need to be familiar with for your famous baccalaureate that's arriving at the end of this year. So I would ask that you take notes on the different concepts we're going to discuss. I'll also give you some vocabulary that you might want to write down. I will make sure that your teachers have a copy of the presentation so that if you have any questions or anything you don't understand or anything you want to see again, they will be able to work with you on that material. Okay? So, as I said, I am American, but I have been living and working in Lyon since January of 1992. A million years ago, basically. I was recruited from the United States to work for a French-American business school called CEFAM, which is in Lyon. In the CEFAM program, students spend 3 years in Lyon following an American business curriculum taught in English by American professors, and then they go for their 4th and final year to the United States, to one of our partner universities, and they earn the degree from the U.S. university and from CEFAM. We actually have one of your former students who is currently at CEFAM. So, that makes me something of an expert on the American dream, because for the past 27 years I have been working with young people like yourselves who have decided that they want to incorporate the United States, either their education or their career, into their futures. So this idea of what is the American dream that has been attracting people for hundreds of years is something I'm pretty comfortable with. Today we're going to take a look at the American dream and how it has evolved. Some people feel that the American dream is dead or dying. I'm here to say, que nenni. Donald Trump has not killed the American dream. It has been in constant evolution since the beginning. So yes, it is changing, absolutely, but it is not dead. So we're going to take a look at this evolution so that you can better understand how it has changed over the years and maybe what it resembles today. So first thing, when I say American dream, what do you think of? I say American dream, you say, what do you say? Burgers! What do you say? Opportunities. Someone over here. I say American dream. You say? Liberty and wealth for all. Okay, we're giving it away. Come on, what else do you say? What else do you think of when you hear the American dream?
A change.
A change.
Success and great education.
Success and?
Great education.
Gratification or great education?
Education.
Great education.
Great education. Thank you. Would you like to add something, mademoiselle? You have another idea? No. Yes. From the bottom to the top. Excellent. So let's take a look at some of the most common words people associate with the American dream. The first, of course, being success. Success is what drives Americans, okay? Now, I'm sure everybody was thinking, but nobody wanted to say it, money. Usually, that's the first thing we think of when we think of the American dream. Somebody mentioned opportunities. Absolutely. Very often, the opportunities are professional opportunities. Many young people today, and many people through the centuries, have always felt that there would be more opportunity for growth as a person and a professional in the United States. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. Now, we said from the bottom to the top. So there's one expression you should be familiar with, especially for the baccalaureate, and that is rags to riches. What are rags? What does that mean?
I'm not sure it's 100% right, but rags is a little bit of filthy cloth.
Oh, filthy cloth. Excellent.
I don't know.
Exactly. When we talk about rags, we're talking about very old, dirty articles of clothing that cannot really be used anymore for clothes. But the idea is you have no money and you don't have proper clothing. So you start very poor, dressed in rags, and you work your way up to the top where you have riches. So rags to riches is the idea of transition from nothing to everything, or from bottom to top. Another expression that we associate with the American dream is self-made man. Now, in the United States, we have a very independently based culture. The individual comes first, the group comes second. In France, you have a collective culture, which means what's good for the group is more important than what's good for each individual. So in the United States, we are very proud to say, I did it myself, with no help from anyone. So part of the American dream is succeeding alone, by yourself, with no help. And that's what we call a self-made man. Starting with nothing, no help from anyone, and you arrive at a higher place in life or in society. Now, one thing I also want you to keep in mind is family. Family has been part of the American dream for Americans for a very long time. Typically, when people are outside the United States looking in, they don't see how important family is. But I want you to keep that in mind. Now, here are several words that Americans associate with the American dream. We'll look at a couple now, but your professors will be able to go back over this with you to make sure you're comfortable with all of these words. Si jamais, the day of the exam, you have to talk or write about the American dream. So, money, passion, wisdom, devotion, drive, motivation, inspiration, hope, reward, triumph. These are all words that Americans think of when they think of the American dream. Okay? Everybody remember this guy? Yeah. Of course. So, President Obama, former President Obama, used the idea of American dream during his victory speech in 2012. I want you to listen to the part of his speech where he evokes the American dream. I'm going to let you listen to it once for general comprehension, and then I'm going to ask you to listen again for some of the specifics. Okay? Everybody ready? Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. All right. Here we go.
I believe we can keep the promise of our founding. The idea that if you're willing to work hard, it doesn't matter who you are, or where you come from, or what you look like, or where you love. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, or Hispanic, or Asian, or Native American, or young or old, or rich or poor, able, disabled, gay or straight. You can make it here in America if you're willing to try.
Okay. So, he says at the end, you can make it. What does to make it mean in English? Can you give me a synonym? Yes.
You can succeed.
Exactly. You can succeed here in America. And there are two conditions. He gives one in the beginning and he gives one at the end. Work hard. And what was the one that he said at the end? The beginning he says you have to work hard, and he says at the end you can make it if... Okay, well I want you listening for that last condition. I also want you to listen for the opposites. He says it doesn't matter if you are this or that, this or that, this or that. Listen for those adjectives and write down as many of those pairs as you can. Okay? Here we go.
I believe we can keep the promise of our founding. The idea that if you're willing to work hard, it doesn't matter who you are, or where you come from, or what you look like, or where you love. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, or Hispanic, or Asian, or Native American, or young or old, or rich or poor, able, disabled, gay or straight. You can make it here in America if you're willing to try.
What does he say at the end? If you're willing to try. So the two conditions, the first condition that he says at the beginning, if you're willing to work hard, and at the end, if you're willing to try. And in the middle, he says it doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter where you come from. Doesn't matter who you love. And then he gives us these pairs. What pairs did you hear? Yes.
Young or old.
Young or old. Abled or disabled. Disabled is the word we use instead of handicapped. Yes. Black or white. Gay or straight.
Poor or rich.
Poor or rich. Exactly. Do you hear any others? No? Yes?
Native American or Asian or
Hispanic. Exactly. Native American, Hispanic, or Asian. Those are three minorities in the United States. So basically his message is, it doesn't matter. Anybody can be successful. Everybody can be successful. So let me just tell you this. When you're preparing for your exam, if you can quote former President Obama's victory speech from 2012 to prove your point, ça pourrait vous faire des petits points en plus. Okay? All right.
I believe we can keep the promise of our founding.
No.
The
Enough.
idea that if you're willing to...
Sorry. Okay. Now, let's go back to this idea of American dream. The very first time that we address this concept is in a document called the Declaration of Independence, which was signed in 1776. This is a letter that a group of colonists wrote to King George. And the letter said, King George, we're done. We're out. We're finished. We are no longer part of England. We are going to be a separate country. Bye-bye. Where was this written? Philadelphia. Absolutely. Definitely. Philadelphia was the city where the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were written. It was actually the first capital of the United States. These men, and we're going to talk about them in just a minute, they had an idea. They had an idea about a new social model. The idea of this new social model came from the French, from the Enlightenment, exactly, l'âge des Lumières, where all of a sudden men were starting to think, hey, maybe God didn't really choose somebody to be our king. Maybe we don't need a king to tell us what to do. Maybe God is not up there deciding every good thing and every bad thing that happens to us. And so they decided they wanted to create a new society. And in this society, they recognized that every man, would take a little longer for women, but every man who was white and who owned land had 3 rights that they were born with that nobody could take away. And those rights were the right to live freely, so life, liberty, and the third one is what we call the pursuit of happiness. And that means that every man has the right to decide what makes him happy, what he wants in life, and to pursue that idea of happiness. That, for Americans, is a right that we have. Decide our own happiness and pursue it. So when I told you that I had been in France for the past 27 years, my American dream was actually to move to France and live here. But because I grew up in a culture that told me I could decide my own happiness and I could pursue it and I could make it a reality, I did, even though it meant actually leaving the US, which is kind of ironic. So, the very first time that we address this concept is in the Declaration of Independence. Okay. Oh. However, it's not until 1931 that we actually put a name on this concept. In 1931, what is happening in the United States? What happens in 1929 in the United States? Alors, in 1929, you have the bourse. How do we say bourse in English? The stock market.
It's the crack from Wall Street.
Alors, Wall Street is the street where the stock market is located. Absolutely. In New York. Excellent. The Wall Street area is where all the financial goings-on in the United States are located. The stock market crashed in 1929. The entire U.S. economy was destroyed, kaput. There was nothing left. It was the end of the United States. People were throwing themselves out of windows, committing suicide. It was the end of the world for them. It was the beginning. Now, how do we say crise économique in English? No. Economic crisis is not what we're going to call it. It's actually called an economic recession in English. This created a big recession, which is called a depression. So in the 1930s, the United States was in the middle of an economic depression. In 1931, Americans were really asking themselves, who are we? What do we believe in? Do we even exist anymore as a country? And very often in times of crisis or turmoil, countries, cultures ask themselves some very serious questions. And so this author, James Truslow Adams, wrote a book called The Epic of America. And he is the first person to use the expression, the American dream. And he describes it as being the dream of a place. So initially, the American dream is a dream of a place, of a land. It's a land where life is better, where life is richer, and not necessarily in monetary terms, where life is fuller. So people have been dreaming of a place for a better life, and a place where people are recognized based on their abilities, not on their name, not on their father's name, not on their bank accounts, but on what they can do or who they are. So I think it's important to go back to the original definition of the American dream being the dream of a place. So we're now going to take a look at how it has evolved over the centuries. In the 17th century, you had people dreaming of a good life. They were looking for a place. They were looking for a place where they could practice their religion safely and peacefully. Most of the people who came to the United States were Protestants, and they were leaving a Catholic Europe. There were Puritans. I'm sure you heard about the Puritans, the Pilgrims. We just celebrated Thanksgiving. There were also Quakers. There were also Amish. There were all sorts, Methodists, Episcopalians. There were all sorts of Protestants who came. There were also Jews who came. There were a lot of different people who were looking for a place where they could live and practice their own new religion. So what they were looking for was religious freedom. Okay? Now we associate very closely with the Puritans because they came and they're kind of the basis of what became the United States. And two of their values that we have kept are first a strict moral code. They were not very fun, and you will see a little later on that we kept this idea of a strict moral code. As a matter of fact, one of the images that Europeans have of the United States is that they're kind of uptight, puritanical. Can't show a boob on television. Can't, you got to be really careful, right? The second value is one of a very strong work ethic. That too we get from the Puritans. So we're going to come back to those values. But remember, they were part of the Puritans. Now, if we move forward into the 18th century, we now have those men that Obama spoke of. What did he call them in his speech? Did you hear that? The promise of our founders. So the group of men who wrote the Declaration of Independence and later the Constitution are called the Founding Fathers in the United States. They're the people who founded our country. Do you know the names of any of the Founding Fathers? What? Washington, George Washington.
I think there was one named
Le Fay? I don't know. It wasn't the one I'm looking for. I'm looking easy here. Easy to say, easy to remember. Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. Ça vous dit rien, ça? Bah, si. Okay. They loved France. They loved the French. And they loved the Enlightenment philosophy. So if you talk about the founding fathers, George Washington, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. These founding fathers were looking for a place where they could create a new society, where they could create a society based on democracy, based on equality. Okay? So what they're looking for now is no longer religious freedom, they're looking for political freedom. Okay? Now, that brings us into the 19th century. In the 19th century, there's a lot going on in the United States. Over here on the right, you see the territory that was originally given to the new country by Great Britain. The beige part is the original United States after the Revolutionary War. In the middle, that white part used to be France. That was all New France. In 1803, you had a guy named Napoleon who decided to change France's strategy, and instead of pursuing colonization in the New World, he sold it, I think for 15 or 16 million, brought the money back, and used it to go to war for the next 12 years, okay? Which he ended up losing, but anyway. So that we were able to buy from France. And then you can see there are other pieces that we acquire from Spain, from Mexico, from Britain also, until the new country covered almost the entire, that part of the continent that would become the United States. Okay? Now, this is the United States in name, but of course, you have American Indians living on it, and so the United States government needs to encourage its citizens to move west and take over these lands to make them truly American. This is what we call the Western expansion in the United States. So there's a type of propaganda that is put into place by the American government to push people, to encourage people. This man that you see, his name is Horace Greeley. He was a newspaper editor in New York. And he very actively encouraged people through the media to go west. And he's very famous for this quote, "Go west, young man, go west. Go west and grow up with the country." America was a young country. It was not very developed, except for the East Coast. So that meant there was lots of room and lots of opportunities for people who were motivated and wanted to build something. Okay? As a matter of fact, the American government gave land free of charge to anybody who wanted to go. So this is what then becomes the definition of Western expansion. Western expansion equals opportunity. Anybody who wants a better life, Anybody who wants a new beginning, anybody who wants to do something different, live adventure, everybody decides to go west. And of course the government is very happy about this. The justification that we used as a country to go west and decimate the populations that were already in place is called manifest destiny. This means that it is our destiny, our fate, and our responsibility to bring our superior culture to the dark and uncivilized West. Ça vous rappelle rien, non? Exactly! So this is the 19th century. What is France doing in the 19th century? What is Germany doing in the 19th century? What is England doing in the 19th century? What's Belgium doing in the 19th century? They are bringing their superior culture to the dark and uncivilized continents of Africa and Asia. Hi. Everybody's doing this. So the United States was doing exactly the same thing, except we weren't in Africa at this point. And we weren't in Asia. We were moving west. Okay? So this manifest destiny is how Americans justified moving west. However, this is critical to the American dream because of the opportunity moving west represented. And so if we come back to the idea of propaganda, you have authors who are writing books specifically designed for children. One author in particular is called Horatio Alger Jr., and he wrote books for young boys. All of his books are about starting at the bottom, moving to the top. What was the expression we saw in the beginning? Rags to riches. Okay? Take a look at these titles. Strive and succeed. What does to strive mean in English? In English. Strive means to work very, very, very hard to achieve something. Striving for fortune. Working very hard to make that money. Struggling upward. To struggle. Give me a synonym in English for to struggle. Exactly, to fight, to move upward. Once again, this idea of upward mobility. And the last one, from farm boy to senator. Every single time you had the main character who was born with nothing, and through hard work and a strict moral code, you remember that? Where did we get those values? Hard work and strict moral code. From the Puritans. So every single time, born here, hard work, strict moral code, and I am able to move up and be successful. So generations of young men grew up with these role models. This idea of I too can be successful. And then you start getting proof that this really works. John Rockefeller was born in the United States into a very poor family. Worked hard, found opportunities, took risks, invested money, and became a multi-billionaire. Andrew Carnegie was born in Scotland, came to the United States as a child, worked in the mines, dans les mines, with his parents when he was a little boy, But because of hard work, intelligence, opportunity, he was able to make a fortune in steel. What is steel? Acier. Cornelius Vanderbilt, born in the U.S., poor family, worked hard, strong moral code, makes a fortune, this time in railroad and shipping, fret, okay? And J.P. Morgan, born in the United States, poor family, works hard, strong moral ethic, and becomes a success. This is all happening during the Western expansion. How did these people move west? How did we get materials and food and supplies out to them? How did we move things back to the East Coast?
By train.
By train. These men made their fortune through Western development. Railroad. How do you build railroads? With acier, with steel. Okay? How do you finance these programs, these projects? Through banks, which was J.P. Morgan. Okay? And of course, the oil for Rockefeller helped too. So at this point, starting at the late 19th century, you now have a new element added to the American dream. And this is the idea of entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial spirit, plus hard work equals success. Remember, originally we were looking for religious freedom, then political freedom. Now the dream has changed, and we're now looking at success as being the objective, but it's connected with the idea of entrepreneurship. And that is something that has stayed. Steve Jobs, for example. We still have these entrepreneurs. Okay? Now, in the 19th century then, you have people who are seeing the proof that it's possible to have a better life. They're seeing these people in the newspapers. They're hearing the stories. And so now there are masses of people who too want to come to the United States. They're now looking for a new kind of freedom. It's not religious, it's not political. It's what we're going to call economic freedom. They want the opportunity to be free economically and to build a better life for their families. So now we get this idea of family. In the 19th century, it wasn't so much family, it was about individuals, self-made men. Now we've got the idea of family that is going to enter the picture, especially with these immigrant families who are looking for better lives, who are looking for economic freedom. Now, when we move into the 20th century, American society is also changing very fast. One of the big changes is the automobile. The automobile begins with Ford, Henry Ford, and his Model T, which was available for the masses. There was nothing elitist about the cars when they came out. Very quickly, however, they started becoming success symbols. Sports cars, fancy cars, different color cars, different model cars. So this is the beginning of material possessions entering into the American dream. a bigger car, a better car, a fancier car. In the middle, we have an athlete. Does anybody know his name? Greatest baseball player who ever lived. His name is Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth was born in the United States to immigrant parents, German immigrant parents. I think they were bakers. And this little boy was so turbulent, was so hyperactive, I guess we would say today, that his parents did not know what to do with him. So they gave him away. They put him in an orphanage, which I think is just the saddest thing. When he was about 5 years old, his parents put him in an orphanage and said, "Take him, we don't want him, we can't deal with him." For the next 12 years, he lived in an orphanage. And someone in the orphanage had a great idea, and they had this little boy start playing sports to get his energy focused, okay, and channeled. Somebody gave him a baseball bat. And as we say in English, the rest was history. He was the most gifted baseball player of all time. And he set records that have never been equaled, even with all the fancy material we have today. Okay? So this is a time when professional sports are starting to be organized in the United States, and a new vision of the American dream, of the personal pursuit of happiness and the personal dream of being a star athlete, is now becoming a potential or a possible perspective or a possible view of the American dream. And to the right, we have those ladies dancing. What did we call the women in the 1920s who cut their hair and shortened their skirts in English? Do they know that? Starts with an F. L. A. Double P-E-R. Flapper. The flappers were these liberated young women in the 1920s who cut their hair short, shortened their skirts, started driving cars, started drinking bathtub gin, going out partying with jazz and all that. This is the very beginning of women's liberation in the United States, and women get the vote in the 1920s, maybe 1924, 25. This is the beginning of the American dream for women, because up until now, the American dream has been pretty much reserved to white males. And now, all of a sudden, if a woman doesn't want to get married, if a woman wants to go to university, if she wants to be a doctor, if she wants to be a lawyer, it's possible. Not easy, but it's becoming possible. So the early 20th century brings a few new aspects to the American dream. At the same time, however, you have many people in the United States who are not living a dream. They are still dreaming a dream, and their reality is very difficult. On the left, you see a mother in a very poor situation with children who are dirty in cramped housing. Do you know the word for the apartment buildings where immigrants lived? Begins with a T. Tenements. T-E-N-E-M-E-N-T-S. Tenement. Tenements. This is what we call the apartment buildings where they lived. So if you are talking about the immigrants who are suffering, you can say they lived in tenements and they worked in, two words, these these factories where they worked for little pay, terrible conditions. Sweatshops. Sweat. S-W-E-A-T. Plus loin, shops. Sweatshops. That's what we call the factories where people work in terrible conditions, very long hours, for very little pay. So if you're talking about the people who are not part of the American dream, think tenements and sweatshops, okay? Now, after World War II, the American dream really picks up, and we're going to start associating the American dream with family and possessions. So, family, mom, dad, children, dog, okay, very important. The house becomes central, having an independent, separate home. Where is this house located? In the city? It's not the city. What do we call les banlieues chic in English? Suburbs. Suburb. S-U-B-U-R-B-S. Suburbs. Now, people are leaving the city center and they want a little house all to their own in neighborhoods. And you can see that there's another house. There are two houses. You see the neighbor to the right and the neighbor behind. So now we're going to start associating the American dream with the perfect family. Mother, father, 2.5 kids, the dog, the car. So everybody here is hanging out and playing except mom. Mom is working. Just got back from the grocery store, unloading the car. So this is a time when you have very distinct roles for men and for women. And that is also part of the American dream. Okay? Getting married for women. So here are some pictures from that era, and you can see systematically the family, the house, the car. And to the right, we've actually got the big house, we've got two cars, we've got the dog, and we've got the milkman. Okay? So this is kind of the American dream on steroids. This is what everybody wants. Another thing that's going to happen after World War II is leisure time. Americans are going to have time to not work. So they're going to be able to go to the movies. They're going to be able to watch television. And so you have this idea of stars and success through entertainment. Becoming famous is now added to the American dream. You also have the era of toys, consumer goods, boats, pools, bicycles, barbecues, lawnmowers, and you have appliances, dishwashers, washing machines for your clothes, dryers, super duper refrigerators. All of this is now putting pressure on the American dream. Oh my goodness, if I don't have this, my American dream is not complete. And of course, in the 1950s, we have the advertising industry, which starts. If you have not watched Mad Men on Netflix, I suggest you watch a couple episodes. They are very, very clearly portraying the American dream in the 50s and 60s. We are now selling the image of the American dream. And the image of the American dream at this point basically is the family with good teeth. Look at their teeth. Okay? They're usually blonde, they're usually white, they've all got great teeth, and they look oh so happy. Remember the pursuit of happiness from the very beginning? That's what the American dream is. But the idea is that if you look like this, if you act like this, if you have this car, if you have this house, then you too will be living the dream. Over here on the left, this is actually an advertisement for houses outside of Philadelphia. You see the city of Philadelphia in the back, and these were houses that were built for young, happy, successful families. Okay? Don't they just look perfect? At the same time, however, of course, there are major parts of the United States who are not living the dream. They are living in abject poverty. Some of those people are minorities, but not all of them. There are many white people who are also not living the dream. Now, if we talk for a few minutes about the American dream now, money, that's basically what most people think of when they think of the American dream. Also, houses, possessions, cars, pink diamonds, private jets. We also talked about fame. Justin Bieber, who is this? Oh, what do you mean you don't know? Who is that? The guy in the middle, Steph Curry. Don't you know Steph Curry? Please. And who is this? Drake. Exactly. So, you have singers, you have actors, you have athletes who embody the American dream because of their fame. And of course, you've got social media, being famous on Instagram. These families on YouTube. Do you watch the Ace Family? Okay, and their little baby and their Christmas decorations. They have become famous. They are living the American dream. Okay, fine. So this idea of fame now has become part of the American dream. But what do Americans think the American dream really is? Well, according to a recent study, you might be surprised to know that 78% of Americans said that having personal freedom was the most important thing to their vision of the American dream. Over 3/4 of the people interviewed said personal freedom was the most important aspect of the American dream. Which brings me right back to the beginning. Freedom is what people were looking for at the very beginning of the United States. And that is still what Americans associate with the American dream. Achieving affluence. Affluence means wealth, money, riches. That only comes in at 23%. So not even 1/4 of the people who answered this survey said that was what was most important to the American dream. Okay? So I think that's important for you to keep in mind. Your vision of the American dream as non-Americans is not necessarily the same thing as what Americans think of the American dream. Now, we talked earlier about the American dream dying or not dying. I would say that it is not dying. Certain parts of it, however, are fading. And the economic freedom to become a billionaire is absolutely fading. On est d'accord. The people who were able to climb the economic ladder in the U.S. has dropped from 90% for people who were born in 1940 to 50% for people who were born in the 1980s. So it is harder and harder to achieve material or economic dreams. That is absolutely true. But that does not mean that the American dream is dead, because we just saw only 23% of Americans define the American dream through achieving wealth. Okay? So, the idea now is that we've got to decide what is the American dream of tomorrow. Hopefully, it will be one of social equality, acceptance, excellent work opportunities, because we're a capitalistic country, so we got to keep things working and moving, and innovation. That's what we do. And we also can hope that the new American dream is going to celebrate our diversity. That diversity that is at the heart of the original American dream, when people came from all over looking for religious freedom and political freedom and economic freedom. So I would just leave you with this last idea. Even though we don't have any Americans in this room, I hope that you will all take a moment to think about what it is that's important to you, how you would define happiness, and give yourself the opportunity to pursue that happiness. Don't let anyone tell you you can't, ou il y a la crise, ou ça se fait pas, ou tu n'y arriveras jamais. Think like an American. Tell yourself it is your right to choose what makes you happy and to pursue your happiness. Okay? So I want to thank you all for listening to me today. I have a little something for you. There are brochures here for CEFAM if you're interested. And I'll be right back.